are from College Now. Just to introduce ourselves a little bit, my name is Bailey, as he said. I've been doing this since 2011, so this is not our first FAFSA change. Very excited to tell you about all the updates today, all the tips and tricks to kind of make this as seamless as possible. But been doing these presentations for years, so we love it. And then I'll let my colleague David kind of introduce himself.
Hi everybody, my name is David Burke. I'm the manager of adult program services. I've been doing this since 2020, so I jumped right in the heart of COVID. We also manage on, and you'll hear more about our services, college and career guidance, financial aid, which is a big part, student loan services, scholarships, and just really guidance towards post-secondary. So we're going to walk you through a lot of financial aid, but we also have tips and tricks for moving forward.
Absolutely. And one of the reason that we're here is that one of our missions is to ensure that no one has to pay for any college access counseling, financial aid services, etc. So all of our services are free. David did say that we do specialize in scholarships. So if you would like additional help with scholarship searches, that's something that we're very excited and very willing to do with you all as well. And like it says up there, our mission is to essentially help you all get to whatever it is you want to do after high school, any type of education that leads you to a career. So we do a lot around 4-year, 2-year, but also trade certificate and micro credentials as well. But what you're all here for, we're going to talk about financial aid, we're going to talk about the FAFSA, and we're going to give you some time to ask us questions so that we can get everything answered before you leave today. So just to kind of begin the conversation around the cost of attendance, if you grabbed our handouts, you do have a sheet that says direct cost of attendance. That's our current tuition within the state of Ohio. It's just the state of Ohio. We do update that every single year. Those are what we call the sticker prices. One side is the state institutions, on the back side is the private institutions. If you did not get a handout, they are printing some more for you. We apologize that we didn't bring enough. But essentially we always say, don't be afraid of the sticker price. So the sticker price is what the institution tells you it costs, but we go through this whole financial aid process. So through the financial aid process with scholarships, grants, and loans, it does become a lot less. But looking at kind of the net price, that's where you really are going to determine the cost to your family. And we'll get to what a net price is, how do you find it, and that's really kind of what you're going to use with your financial aid award letters, which we will also talk about those towards the end. But just keep that in mind. Usually when we hand out that handout, people kind of are like, oh my gosh, I applied here, I can no longer go here, it's too expensive. Hold those thoughts for after, once you get your award letters, after you have kind of filed your FAFSA and you see what costs are. So like I said, the sticker price is very rarely what you are going to pay for the school. But just in case you wanted to know what's involved in that sticker price, tuition and fees, so the actual costs for classes. If you live on campus, room and board, so that's your dorm. Board is your meal plan. So if you pick a more expensive meal plan, it's going to cost you more. If you pick a less expensive meal plan, it's going to cost you less. If you live in a quad versus a single, those prices also determine your cost of your housing. So those decisions impact the bottom line dollars. We also have books and supplies. They do kind of include in there the average amount of books that someone's going to pay for their schooling. Books are no longer free, or they're not free. There are ways you can get free resources once you're there, but you can be very strategic. Those are included in those cost of attendance numbers. And then finally, they do include kind of personal expenses. They give an estimate for transportation costs. So if you're bringing a car on campus, is there a parking permit fee, etc. So some of those costs may not be applicable to you or your student. So that's why we say always look at what's on your award letter and the actual amount they're billing you. So going into what is financial aid, this is really what you all are here to learn about today. There's a couple different types. So it's the money that you don't have to pay back. So those are your scholarships and your grants. Mr. Saltzman just mentioned, get that scholarship application, get that scholarship application. When you file the FAFSA, it'll tell you if you're eligible for any grants. Those are similar costs, similar funds that you do not have to pay back. Then we go into financial aid that is not free. So we're going to talk a little bit about loans. And then we're also going to talk about work study, which is a way you can earn money as you're on campus. So I've mentioned them, putting them up on the screen so you can actually see them. So the free money, that's what we call gift money, grants and scholarships. If you are a senior or the parent of a senior, you should absolutely be applying for scholarships now. Never stop applying for scholarships. You know, we have lots of different tips and tricks and strategies, but please always apply for those scholarships. Earned money, that's what federal work study is. Now, one of the changes on the FAFSA, so if you are a parent of a student who has completed a FAFSA previously, one of the big changes is there's no longer a work study question on the FAFSA. So it used to say, interested in work study, you'd click yes or no. That is no longer on the FAFSA application. So if you are interested in work study, you actually have to communicate that to the school that you are attending. Still an excellent opportunity, still something we strongly encourage. The difference between work study and you know, working off campus is that you're going to be able to work somewhere on campus, so maybe at the library, maybe the dining hall. They work around your school schedule, and they also will expect you to be doing homework when you're not you know, working on an assignment. So if your task or your job is to shelve books and there's no books to shelve, they're going to sit there and let you do your homework. So it's a fantastic way to earn money without becoming too stressed. They also won't let you work over a certain amount of hours. So they'll say you're eligible to work this many hours. So you're never going to be in a situation where they're going to say, hey, can you work 40 hours this week? I know it's exam week, but I still want you to do this. You will never be in that situation. So it's a fantastic way to work while in school. You are not eligible to do work study if you don't have a FAFSA on file. That is still true. And then finally, borrowed money. This is the conversation around loans. You do have a handout. It's this. It's the one with the purple bars across it. I have the copy. The master copies are getting printed. It says Guide to Funding at the top. That is a handout that kind of outlines everything I just explained in much more detail. It talks about the different types of loans. It talks about the most popular grant, which is the Pell Grant, the total that you may be eligible for if you're eligible for a Pell Grant. Also talks about the OCOG, which is the grant for the state of Ohio, the ranges of OCOG. So those are all of the dollars accessible to the student once the file or the FAFSA is filed. So that is, we always kind of say, is like our financial aid guide. You know, if you only take one handout today, take that one, because it'll really walk you through the options that are kind of presented to you once you get the FAFSA completed. And again, if you don't have it, more copies are coming. And we are happy to answer lots of questions about loans. We get a lot of questions like that. Just a few more details that I haven't kind of touched on yet. The Pell Grant is federal, so that comes directly from the federal government. The OCOG comes from the state of Ohio. So as an Ohio resident, as a graduate of an Ohio high school, you have access to potentially both of those buckets of funding. They are grants. They are generated by the FAFSA. You do not need to pay them back. Similarly, scholarships, we always say they're circumstance-based. So reflect inwards, think, what is special about me? What is something that I can, you know, potentially turn into dollars? And that's how you kind of direct those scholarship searches. A few more points about federal work study that are really, really important. So if you decide you want to do work study, and again, this is the earned money, the third type of money that's generated from a FAFSA application, the amount that you could earn as a student will be listed on your award letter. So you may say, okay, you're eligible to work 20 hours a week. That turns into $2,000 a semester. It's going to say this $2,000 is applied towards your financial aid package. Now, as a student, it is up to you to earn that much money. So it is up to you to make sure you get 20 hours a week with your kind of employer. It's up to you to make sure that you don't call off. So that amount of money may or may not be something you want to take into consideration when you're looking at your financial aid award letter at the end. Similarly, it gets paid to you in the form of a check. So just like any other job, if you get a check, you say, put it in your bank account, you might say, I want to go get Chipotle today instead of paying part of my tuition bill. That's totally fine. But keep that in mind when you're looking at the amount of money that you send to your tuition. So that's just something I wanted to make sure was very clear. Oh, the last thing about that is it's great because it does not technically count as income from the student on the FAFSA. So if you do a work study job and you need to record it on your taxes and you put it in your FAFSA for the following year, it's work study dollars, so it will not kind of impact the AGI of the student. So another fantastic reason to do a work study.
AGI stands for adjusted gross income.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and let me know if I'm going too quickly. I know we have a limited amount of time and I really want to get to the meat of the FAFSA stuff too. Borrowed money, just a few types that I'm going to call out that are on that sheet in front of you. Again, the Guide to Funding. There's some terminology on there that can be a little bit confusing. The federal loans, those are the direct loans. They're subsidized and unsubsidized. The difference between those two is essentially the government pays interest while the student is in school on one of them, and then interest accrues on the other while the student is in school. So different types of loans, different benefits. You can get different amounts of those. Your freshman year of college, you're eligible for $5,500 in loans total, broken into, some are subsidized and some are unsubsidized. Looking at the federal Parent Plus loan, if that's something that is the right decision for your family, essentially this is a loan that the parent takes out in their name for the student. It has a lot of different repayment requirements than a student loan because it's a loan in the parent's name. We can talk through those differences as well, but essentially the big difference is when a student takes out a loan, they don't have to pay it back until after 6 months after they graduate from college or stop attending. The parent must make a payment the following month. So repayment starts immediately for a Parent Plus loan. And then private loans or alternative loans, that's the kind of final loan option for families. These are very different. They're from private lenders. They don't have fixed interest rates. Often the interest rate can change from year to year. If that's a decision that your family is going to make, we're happy to talk through those options as well. Sometimes they're considered less safe loans because those interest rates can change, and they're also not eligible for any of the federal repayment plans within loans. Okay. Final thing before we get into the FAFSA, because I know it's all related, the financial aid aspect is all important, but just a couple additional tips for scholarship searching. We always say think specific, think local, and think easy. Specific, is there something that really relates to you in terms of academic achievement, or a specific hobby or a specific skill set that you have? David is someone that ran track all throughout his collegiate years. If you have questions about sports scholarships or navigating that process, he's a fantastic resource here today. If you're looking at becoming a certain major, so if you're looking at being an engineer, the School of Engineering at the school you're applying to often will have funds available. So, the biggest funder of scholarships will be the institution you attend. However, outside scholarships are also a fantastic resource. So College Now, we do provide some scholarships locally, so look at local organizations, as well as, the scholarship again that was mentioned before we even started talking. But then sometimes the places of employment of parents have scholarships for their students. Unions often have scholarships. If a student's working, their employment place may have scholarships. So for example, McDonald's does have a scholarship for individuals who want to work at McDonald's while they're at school. So all kinds of things like that. And then of course we also say think easy. So no scholarship amount is too small. Believe it or not, if a scholarship's only $500, many people don't want to apply for a $500 scholarship. I don't know why. Often you will get a scholarship when it's a smaller dollar amount because people don't apply to those. So if you get $500 scholarships, that's a lot of money. And a lot of times you can write one essay, kind of tweak it, and submit it to multiple scholarships. So think easy, right? Okay. Now, on to the FAFSA. Whew, this is why we're all here today, I think. So the FAFSA, as I've mentioned a couple times, is your essentially application into all of these different types of financial aid that I just explained very briefly, and hopefully in a way that was easy to digest and not too quickly. It's how you determine eligibility for student loans. It's how you determine eligibility for work study. It's how you determine eligibility for almost every single scholarship that is out there. It's how you determine eligibility for grants, both federal and state. A lot of things that we hear is, oh, I make too much money, I'm not going to file the FAFSA, I'm not going to get anything anyway. A, you never know, and B, you've just cut yourself off completely from both scholarships and student loans. And many scholarships are merit-based, many scholarships are also need-based, but both are very important categories to be looking at. So definitely need to complete the FAFSA. One of the biggest changes, it now calculates what is called the Student Aid Index, right? Formerly known as the EFC, or Estimated Family Contribution. So I'll be using both pieces of language. So if you've filed a FAFSA in the past, what the change is. If you haven't filed a FAFSA, just ignore the old terminology. But Student Aid Index, essentially this is going to be the number that pops out at the end that is going to be the determination of how much aid an institution will be able to provide. It's essentially what we call the baseline for financial needs. So this is the number that's going to determine how needy someone's family is, if for lack of a better way to explain it. It is, the FAFSA is something you file every single year that you're in school. So seniors right now of high school file for their freshman year. Next year, freshman year, you're going to be filing for the sophomore year of college and so on. So you will need it for 4 years, something you do for 4 years. Now, it will open in December 2023. As you all probably heard, it was supposed to open on the 1st of December. The new launch date they are telling us is the 31st of December. We were just chatting earlier. Essentially, it must be open by the 31st because legally it has to be open this year. So, if you have questions on when it's updated or not, you can always check the website. You can always reach out to us, but that is the new launch date will open. It does have a new look and feel. So, the screenshot above is kind of what it will look like. If you looked at it before, it was blue. Now it's kind of this like greenish color. It is significantly shorter. So previously we had to answer 100 questions. Now we have to answer 36. So all of these changes were to try to make it something that's less intimidating. They spent a lot of time and research on how to make it better. Now it's a 36 question form. Hopefully feels a lot easier. You do have to have an FSA ID to start the FAFSA. And when we say that, really the form is supposed to be started by the student. So step 1, the student needs an FSA ID. Essentially, it's just a username and password for this website. So you can go, that would be step 1. If you haven't done that yet, please have the student do that. Every contributor, which we'll talk about who a contributor is, but often it's going to be the parents of that student will need an FSA ID. So we'll go through exactly who is a parent, who needs an FSA ID. Sometimes both parents will need it. Sometimes one parent will need it. It just depends on the family situation. One of the other big changes that has come up, so if you have done this in the past, you previously listed how many students were in college. That question no longer exists. That no longer impacts the way aid is calculated. So if you saw that in the past, that is a very big difference. More income is included, and what that is actually a good thing. What that means is that previously, if you made $50,000 or less, they'd ask you for additional assets. So if you filed a 1040A or 1040EZ, then they would look into additional assets and questions. That income cap has been bumped up to $60,000. And so once you hit $60,000, then they'll ask for additional information. If you are below that, they will not. So it could benefit a family, it may not benefit a family. But it is taking a more holistic picture of a family's financial situation. Students must invite contributors. So if you are a contributor, so if you are somebody's mom and you have a student going to school, you guys live together, you're the guardian of that student, your student must invite you as a contributor to their FAFSA. So previously, the parent could, log into the FAFSA, they get to the parent section. Now you have to be invited to get access because the student's only going to see information about the student and the contributor is going to see information about the contributor. So that's a very big difference.
I just want to add in, excuse me, students are recognized as dependent up until the age of 24 currently. So for anybody with a student, you may need to be that contributor, that signer of the FAFSA application where they can send it to you up until the age of 24, depending on the student situation. So some students are independent, some students are dependent. But as long as you're 24, you as the acting parent will need to sign the FAFSA application.
Yeah, and if there's any questions about dependency, we can definitely answer those. Sure. Yes. Oh, if a student is married, yes, that will affect the student's dependency status. Oh, we will get to that. Yeah, absolutely. Ooh, that'll be yeah. That's a great question. And I already touched on that last one. Okay, great. Final changes, and then we'll get into what the form looks like. Contributors do have to consent to bringing information over from the IRS. So previously we had the IRS data retrieval tool. Really what you could do is you could type in the address that's listed on the taxes and pull it over. Now the contributors actually have to physically consent that that information can be brought over. We do recommend that this is something that you all do because it will automatically verify income amounts, and we'll talk about verification at the end as well. But they essentially legally have to verify a certain number of individuals and their incomes in this application process. I already mentioned the student aid index. The last kind of terminology update that we're going to be using throughout this presentation, the FAFSA submission summary, that's the final document that you receive at the very end. You know, that used to be called the student aid report. Now it's called the FAFSA submission summary. So when you're talking to different colleges, they're going to say, hey, send me your FSS. And you're like, what is the FSS? That's the kind of final submission page of the form. Of course, yeah.
There's a white Subaru in the bus turnaround lot, which is like right in front of door 1. If you guys drive a white Subaru, we need you to move right over.
Okay. I've got my handouts back, so I just want to call attention to a couple things that are in your hands right now. So I mentioned your FSA ID. Make sure you do that as step 1. We do have a handout that says steps for creating your FSA ID. It says it up at the top. Okay. And then we do have another handout that we provided. Some people like, you know, organizers like this. Some people don't. It's completely up to you. But we have an FSA ID handout. A place where you can record answers, record your password. If you have like a filing system or a locked space where you keep passwords, if you write them down, this is a good option for you. We say, you know, this may not be perfect because you shouldn't write your passwords down. This is a very secure username and password. So if you write it down, make sure it's somewhere in a safe locked space. But you typically use it once a year, so you're probably going to forget your password. It's a really kind of challenging if you forget it. So make sure you write it down, know exactly what it is so that year to year you're going to use it again.
One more interjection.
Yeah.
This is brought up because when you need to access the FAFSA, you're probably in a hurry and you're probably just going to want to get it done. But if you don't get the password 3 times, it's going to lock you out for 30 minutes. And depending on how you set up your day, or if you're making an appointment with one of us, it's just like inconvenient. You're like, oh, well, what do we do for 30 minutes? It's like, well, you twiddle your thumbs. But
yeah,
it's just easy access. I know, like, nobody's going to break in and pay your student loans if you have any. But it's
you never know.
Very convenient to have.
Yeah. And David actually brings up a really good point. We do a lot of advising after individuals have graduated from school and they're kind of managing their federal loan payments. You still use that same username and password if you took out loans and you need to make payments and access those accounts. So we say you need it for 4 years. You may need it for as long as it takes you to repay student debt if you take out some loans.
Or if you want to continue in higher education,
doctors,
lawyers, etc.
Graduate degrees.
Professionals in their studies, you'll use that for life. So your FSA ID is attached to your social security number. So for life, you can use that. So it's just very convenient to have that username, ID, password.
Yeah. And the final handout I'm going to call your attention to right now before we get into what you need to file the FAFSA, the top 10 changes to the FAFSA. So this is really for those families who have completed a FAFSA in the past and are doing it this year. If this is your first year completing a FAFSA, this handout would be something I would say please ignore because it may just confuse you. It does have good information on it, but if this is your first time through it, you don't need to know what it used to be like. But this is for if you've done one in the past and it's changing. Ooh, okay. All right, so what do you actually need to complete the FAFSA? Up here we've got listed all the things that you will need to actually get this form completed. So FSA ID, we've already talked about that. You will need it for the student and the parent. And again, we're going to talk about who exactly is a parent on the FAFSA. Your tax returns. So the information that we are looking at is from 2022. Yes, we know you're doing this financial aid application for the school year that is 2024-2025. This may be great. This may be no issue at all because your income, stays the same from year to year to year. If you have big changes in income, there is something that we can do to remedy that. But yes, you are entering tax information from 2022. If you are someone that receives child support, you would be reporting the child support that you received from last year. If you pay child support, you would be reporting the amount of child support paid for that last year. So kind of notice those differences in years. So taxes from 2022, child support from last year. It does seem a little bit, odd, but that is just what it is. And then, of course, asset information. So it's going to ask you a question of the value of your savings account if you have one. What's the cash in there? What's the cash of your checking account? And they always say the amount in that account the day that you file the FAFSA. So the day that you're filling in the form, the day that has, the amount that day. So you can use that information how you would like. And then net worth of investments. This excludes retirement accounts. So if you have a 401k, you will not list the amount of your 401k. If you have, different, stocks and bonds unrelated to a retirement account, you would report that investment amount. If you own a farm or a business, this is actually also a change from previous years. So if you own a farm or a business with any employees, including yourself, you do now need to list the amount of that asset. Previously, you had to have 100 workers or more on your farm or business to report that asset. That is a change. Even if there's just one employee, we now need to report those asset amounts. So I'm happy to answer lots of questions, probably in a one-on-one setting about if you have a farm or business that you need to report. How do we do that? What are your questions around it? We've done a lot of work around those. And then, of course, if you have received any federal benefits, so anything from food stamps or I'm blanking on the others. Yes, thank you. That you've received from the federal government, we do those. That is actually also a change that is now on there. Sometimes, depending on your situation, we'd list it or we wouldn't, but now we list it always. And then you can list up to 20 schools. So this is a financial aid application, essentially. The purpose is to kind of capture the financial profile, send it to the schools that the student has applied to. You used to only be able to send it to 10 colleges and universities. Now you can send it to 20. So that's exciting.
Quick tip. The schools can see when you send a full list of institutions, so they'll know who your number one is. So file the FAFSA schools alphabetically.
Yeah.
So that way the institution that you're going for doesn't see, just using this as an example, you want to go to Ohio State, but you put down Bowling Green, Kent, and Akron.
And they're above Ohio State in the list. Colleges are very funny.
So colleges can be picky. Well, this person really wants to go here. They put us first. So just consider putting them alphabetically rather than random by choice in school that you want to choose first, just as a heads up.
That's a really good tip. Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're going to reject you, but just.
We always provide tips for caution at all times. And when you add them, you can move them around. So you don't need to add them alphabetically. You can add them and then move them.
Yes.
Yeah. Or at least that's what we expect. That's what we've been told in the demos that we've seen. Okay, so now that you know what we need to complete the FAFSA, just kind of going through the whole process, we're kind of go through this a little step by step in detail, but this is kind of the quick snapshot. So if you're going to take another picture, take a picture of this. We already talked about the FAFSA. We already talked the FSA ID. Once the student has their FSA ID, they can actually begin the form. So the student is the one who is supposed to begin the form. They will fill out the student information. At the end of their kind of little student profile information, they are asked to invite a contributor. Parents, you will not be able to do anything until you are invited to be a contributor. That's for later. Once the contributors are invited, then you fill in the parent information. If you are someone, and this is really based on taxes now. So for example, I'm just going to put a few scenarios out there because then you can start thinking about your own personal situation. So when we have questions at the end, we can help you with your specific stuff. If you are married but filing separately, you will need both parents to have an FSA ID. So the student will have to invite contributor 1, have contributor 1's email. Then you'll have to have contributor 2 and have contributors 2 email. Both parents will have to verify the income. Both parents will have to fill in a section on the FAFSA about themselves because you have separate taxes. Now, if your parents are married and you file jointly, You just need one contributor, just one FSA ID, username, and password to pull over that information and verify. If your situation's more unique than that, we'll talk through a couple additional scenarios. But once the parents have added their information, the contributors have signed off, yes, this information is correct, that's when you're going to get your student aid index. Your student aid index, again, is the kind of the temperature read of the financial need of your family. That's the number that schools are going to look at to kind of determine your financial aid award letter. So if you don't have your contributors verify the information, schools are never going to get kind of that, this is your financial picture. They will not provide financial aid award letters. So that's very, very important in terms of both or one contributor needs to verify the information. Colleges will then take that to calculate the aid. They will then send you the what we call student aid award letters, so then you can actually see those funds. And we always say compare award letters. So, okay. A little bit more about FSA ID. You're going to need to know exactly how your name appears on your Social Security card. If your name is spelled wrong on your Social Security card, your name is going to be spelled wrong on your FAFSA, your FSA ID application, right? Date of birth, you need your Social Security number, you need your current address. So definitely you're inputting all of the information as they appear on your legal federal documents. This is true for the student, this is true for the parents. So if you're in the middle of a name change, you know, if it's not legally done, you're going to use your previous name. So things to think about as you're through those different processes. You do need an email address and a cell phone number. A dual authenticator process is in play, and you do need to verify both a cell phone number and an email. All emails, all cell phone numbers need to be different and distinct. So if you have the student have an email address and the contributor have the same email address, it is not going to work. So if you need to create an email address, please make sure you do so. We already talked about make sure you have all of the information filled out, your recovery or your recovery questions, your passwords. You've got that fancy handout to make sure that you have it. When you create an FSA ID account, this is what the website looks like. So we are a big fan of making sure that you know what the websites look like, because unfortunately there are a lot of scams out there. So you're going to see the little green, progress box as you're creating it.
In some cases, parents, I've ran into this, I've never filled this out, but it keeps telling me there's an error when I complete the FSA ID. You might already have one, whether you remember it or not.
Oh yeah,
it could
that's
be
a good point.
as simple as your guidance counselor from high school having you create one to just apply to schools.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't remember it, but decade and a half ago, it happened, and then I just have to recover your information. So always check the security recovery points, so it'll ask you security questions. If you can't obtain your email from that time, it's likely because that email is lost or deleted. You're going to just have to call into the FSA. There is a phone number. It's like 888 something.
Hopefully you don't have to call it.
If you can't access the email, you can call in. You get to the help desk, and they'll actually recover your information or reset it for you. So if you see that you can't create your FSA ID due to an error, you may already have one. So students, that goes for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have students, I've never filled out an FSA ID. You may have, you just don't remember going through these steps. So yeah, visualize it. That's what it's going to look like.
And that's a really good point too. So if you are, as a parent, you have previously been in school and you had a PIN number, if you're old like me, you had a PIN number, it may not let you create an FSA ID. It may want you to recover some information to then connect it to your PIN number account to create your username and password. Sometimes it can get kind of funky like that, because I do remember when I had to switch over, it was a little bit challenging. And again, we're happy to walk you through all of those challenges. And then quickly, student enters the student information. They do need their tax information from 2022 if they were working, the amount in their checking and savings. They need their college list, and then of course the emails of their contributors. I know I'm repeating a lot of information, but it's just because we want it to be in your brains before you leave us today. Of course, invite contributors. So I've been alluding to who are the parents on the FAFSA. This is where we're going to talk about who are the parents on the FAFSA. So number one, I've already mentioned, but I'm going to say again, married and living together. That one is pretty straightforward. They file taxes together. Again, pretty straightforward. Married and filing separately. Both of those will be parents and contributors on your FAFSA. We will also include parents living together who are not married. Both of those parents will also be contributors on the FAFSA. And both sets of parents' information will be listed. Similarly, parents not living together, they're still going to ask for information for both of those parents. If either one of those parents is also remarried, we will include the information of that step parent. So if you live with mom and mom is remarried, both mom and stepdad will be contributors. Okay. Within issues of if your parents do not both provide 50% support, so if you have parents that are not living together and you live with one over the other, you will only then include the one parent that provides more support. So they say 51% of support. This year, they're saying the parent that makes more money is the parent that provides 51% of support. So in the past, you could kind of have some wiggle room to say, I live with mom, so she provides more, support for me. She makes less money, but it doesn't matter. I live at her house, so she provides 51% of the support. Now, whichever parent makes more money, that's the parent they want on your FAFSA if your parents are not living together and married. Okay. Happy to answer more questions about that later. Now, I'll skip this. We've already talked about it. Who are not considered parents? So we always like to talk about this as well because this may indicate that your student should be an independent, which then does produce a different financial aid award letter. So a widowed step parent. So if your mom married someone else, and so your mom and your stepdad, but then your mom unfortunately passed away, your stepdad would not be considered a parent on the FAFSA. That may indicate that you can be an independent student. Grandparents, so if you're living with grandparents, whether if they have guardianship over you, they are not considered parents. You would be considered an independent student. Similarly, if you live with foster parents, other individuals that are considered legal guardians, so if your aunt is your legal guardian, they're not a parent on the FAFSA, you're considered an independent student. And then similarly with, we always say older brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles. If you are living with an individual who is not a parent but not a legal guardian, there's a different process that we would go through to help you identify if you're independent or not. Oftentimes you are, but that's something that is kind of a separate conversation. But we always like to put this on there because very, very important. Sometimes people don't realize that they may be able to be an independent student based off their current living situation.
Why? How does independent status affect you as a student? For independent status, you get the full Pell Grant and a
full OCOG.
And a full OCOG, so that Ohio, that state grant, as well as an increase in subsidized and unsubsidized loans. So it gets bumped up to $9,500 in subsidized and unsubsidized loans for independent students. So the package, the financial aid package increases.
Yes, it increases significantly. Independent students continued. So we already had a question about students who are married. That does impact your status. If you are a married student, even if you're under the age of 24, you are considered independent. If it happens mid-year, we would definitely want to do a special circumstance, which we'll talk about at the end, but absolutely. If you are a student and you have children and you are the person kind of providing more than half of care for your child, if you are an armed services veteran of any kind, or currently on active duty, this is different than ROTC. So if you are a high school student and you're going into ROTC, very different than doing active duty. If you are unaccompanied youth who is homeless or at risk of being homeless, when we mention, if you're living with your aunt or uncle or grandparent and they're not your legal guardian, oftentimes you're put into this category at risk of being homeless. It's just kind of the distinction of you're not with a legal guardian, so no one's legally responsible for you, whether this is a true statement or not for that particular student. And then, of course, if you are a student who at any time at the age of 13 or older experienced any one of these situations, so both of your parents have passed away, you've been in foster care, or you've been a dependent or ward of the court, even if it was just for a day. If it happened while you're 13 or older, it does mark you as independent. Even if you're living with your legal guardians and your legal guardians are your parents, if at any point in time that was part of your situation, you are an independent student. Okay. Now, we've already went through this, but you submit your FAFSA, that information, you get your student aid index to you. The student aid index goes to the school. That's how you determine your Pell Grant eligibility. That's how you determine your OCOG eligibility, which is your Ohio, essentially your Ohio College Grant. And this year we have seen a significant increase in that amount of money, which is fantastic. But really, the items that contribute to your student aid index are kind of listed above here. It's a formula. We can't change the formula. Unfortunately, it is what it is. It's just, you know, the changes. It's your income, your adjusted gross income, your assets, and unfortunately, the family size noted on the FAFSA form, which will now match your taxes. Okay, so one point about this slide that I just want to mention, we've talked about award letters a lot. You will only get award letters from the schools that you have been accepted to. So if you put 20 colleges on your FAFSA and you submit it, and only 10 of those 20 accept you, you're only going to receive 10 financial aid award letters based off of the financial information put in. The financial aid award letters, just a couple things to note. You always want to compare them. So you've got a fantastic guidance team that can walk you through that process. We're also happy to talk through it. Each award letter looks different. There's no standard form. So even though the FAFSA is a standard form, the financial forms that are produced from them are not. So just be very careful and very aware as you're reading them. But you already know what to look for. You already know to look for grants, scholarships, and loans, and work study. All four of those things will appear on your financial aid award letters.
Also, in review of your financial aid award letter, consider that's most likely for the year and not the semester, so you need to cut that in half.
Mm-hmm.
So just consider like, oh wow, I've got $10,000 in aid, for example, and it only cost me $10,000 to go per semester. Well, that's $20,000 in totality, not just $10,000 in total. So consider how much you're getting, and then you have to cut that in half, and then you'll have to fulfill the rest of that with scholarships, grants, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Consider how much the school, state is giving you as well.
Yeah, which is fantastic. Okay, so in summary, you do have to file the FAFSA every year. It should be available by December 31st. Hopefully it'll be available sooner. It generates every type of financial aid that you could possibly utilize within the collegiate spaces. And you do have to complete your taxes annually to make sure that they're ready for the FAFSA. Again, this year's FAFSA will look at the 2022 taxes. So hopefully you have filed your 2022 taxes at this point. Now, getting into verification a little bit. So one of the things that schools are legally required to do, they're legally required to select a random amount of students from their financial aid awards and verify that financial aid information. You will know immediately if you've been selected for verification once you submit your FAFSA application and receive your student aid index and your FAFSA submission form. There will be a little red asterisk next to your student aid index. So if you see that little red asterisk, no, you have been selected for verification. That's what the new kind of indication of verification is now. If you don't know what that little asterisk is, you would have no idea that that means you've been asked to verify. What does that mean? It means you're going to have to complete a verification worksheet for every school that the student applied to. So if the student applied to 20 schools, all 20 schools are federally required to verify your income and the information on the FAFSA as true and accurate. So you will need 20 financial aid verification worksheets. Each school has their own worksheet, okay? In addition to that, you will need to submit a standard set of documents, right? So we have something that's called a tax transcript, or they may say we want a copy of your W-2s, or we want a copy of your K-1s. They will tell you exactly what they want. You will have to give that to every single school. It's just an extra kind of step. Some people have to take it, some people don't. If you are selected for verification and you do not do it, it will delay the financial aid award process. So it's definitely something. And now it's just a little tiny asterisk. Yes?
Say if you were selected for the verification, would you only have the ones you were accepted to, only on the ones that you put into the FAFSA?
So it's only on the ones that you put into the FAFSA, correct? And you would only need to do it for the ones that you've been accepted to. Yes, great question. Okay, now essentially what's next? So you filed your FAFSA, right? You've gone through all of the steps. You've been selected to verify, you verify. If you have applied to a private school and they are asking for a secondary financial aid application, it's called the CSS profile. Some of you may need to complete the CSS profile. Some of you may not, but just want to make sure that we say, that phrase aloud, because it is a separate application. It's different from the FAFSA. And then if you have a special circumstance, so I know we've kind of chatted about if your student's getting married, if your financial situation has changed significantly since 2022, if there's been sort of a divorce or separation or a death, those are really strong cases to file a special circumstance with the school. And essentially what that means is that, hey, the FAFSA doesn't represent my current financial situation. I'd like to give you more information about it. This is what it is. And then each school will look at that and then determine how that changes at that particular school. And a little bit more about each of those things. So CSS profile, like I said, is just an additional financial aid application, essentially. It is not free. The FAFSA is free, always free. The CSS profile does have a fee. It's $25 for the first school, $16 for every school after that. So if you've applied to 5 different private schools, all 5 may require the CSS profile. And this is actually a very lengthy application. However, it's not terrible. It's essentially, it'll look at your taxes and it'll do like a line-by-line question and answer. So they really go really into depth. They also ask questions about like, what is the cost of your monthly mortgage if you own a home? So they do a deeper financial view of each family. With families that are below an income of $100,000, it is waived. So you can get those fees waived if you make less than $100,000 as a family. Okay, a little bit more about special circumstances, and then we're going to stop talking and allow time for questions and answers. But essentially, we've got some really excellent examples of special circumstances. These are by no means an exhaustive list of special circumstances. We do want to make it very clear that there's no place on the FAFSA to indicate these circumstances. So you must reach out to the schools that your student has applied to if any of these relate to you. So our advice is once you have been accepted to the school, that's when you then reach out and you've included them on your FAFSA. So, if you've had a job or layoff or reduction in work hours, that's a great reason to do a special circumstance appeal. If you have income from rental properties that are no longer available and you've had to report those, rental properties on the FAFSA because it's listed as an asset, that's a great example. If you have any sort of current illness that wasn't, there in 2022, but now you have a lot of medical bills, or even if you had it in 2022 and now you have a lot of medical bills, something that's really important to share. Like I said, divorced or separated, and then of course a death in the family. And again, each of these appeals is different at each school. You have a fantastic guidance team. They can help you through that. We're also happy to help you all through that. One final point before we turn it over for questions. So the FAFSA is not open right now. We were hoping that it would be. We were hoping that we'd be able to give you, this is exactly what this page looks like, this question, that question, because they're still sort of updating it and changing it. What we were able to share with you today is all of the information that they've trained us on this year for those changes. So if you are very antsy and you're very curious about what you might be receiving from the FAFSA, we recommend doing the financial aid estimator. So that's just a screenshot of the financial aid estimator. It is on studentaid.gov. So I'll say that again, studentaid.gov. That is what that's kind of the government's website for all financial aid kind of support spaces. And you can just go in and do the student aid estimator. So it's, again, an estimate. It's not perfect, but it can give you kind of an idea right now, especially, with the kind of, at this point in the year, we're normally much further ahead. So recognizing that it's sometimes stressful to plan financially without being able to actually do a financial aid application. But it is not the FAFSA. Just want to stress that. The estimator is not the FAFSA. The FAFSA will hopefully spit out something similar. But again, this is the estimator. And then finally, if you'd like to make an appointment with us we do one-on-one FAFSAs. We're going to be here for the next 30 minutes to talk about questions. We can't help you start your FAFSA at this point because it's not available, but come December 31st, if you'd like, someone to walk you through it, that's essentially what our job is. That's what we're here for. Please take advantage of us and our expertise. You can use that QR code to meet with us. And then something else that David and I specialize in that I just feel like I should mention, if you as a parent are interested in going back to school or have any desire to go to school for the first time, or have someone in your life that is not a traditional high school student and interested in the post-secondary, that's the work we specialize in, and we actually have scholarships for adults specifically. So we spend a lot of time helping high school students. We do a lot of work with high school students, but parents, you are not forgotten if this is a journey you'd like to be on as well. And that is everything that we have for you. So, time for questions.